Hey guys, tonight you step into a Viking longhouse at the edge of a cold northern fjord. The air is thick with the scent of pine smoke and sea salt. Outside, wind lashes against the turf roof, carrying whispers from the ocean. Inside, firelight flickers over carved wooden beams and sleeping faces beneath layers of fur. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, breathe in the warmth. You're safe here. The night outside is endless, a blue-black dome scattered with icy stars, but inside, everything glows. You hear the low murmur of voices, the crackle of embers, the soft clatter of a wooden ladle. Somewhere, a child stirs in sleep, a dog stretches and sighs. The air is heavy with roasted meat, damp wool, and a faint trace of tar from the boat pulled ashore. The world is ancient here, simple but alive. Tonight, you'll drift through the hidden life of Viking knights. The smoke, the warmth, the rituals, the strange comfort found in a world of cold. You'll learn what it meant to live and dream in these longhouses, to breathe through the winter storms, to tell stories by firelight, to wait for dawn when the sea finally quieted. Soon, you'll see that beneath the fierce legends, there was a softer world, one built on endurance, laughter, and the small comforts of survival. You feel the air first, cold, sharp, and alive. The wind moves like a living thing, brushing over your face and through your hair, tasting faintly of salt and pine resin. Far in the distance, gulls cry over the restless sea. The Vikings built their homes here because the sea gave everything: fish, trade, stories, and sometimes death. To survive, you learn to read the rhythm of waves, to love the chill as much as the warmth. The land itself breathes in silence. The soil is thin, scattered with frost even in late spring. You notice how people build their lives not in defiance of this cold, but in companionship with it. Every gust against the longhouse walls is both a warning and a lullaby. That balance between hostility and harmony shaped the Viking spirit. They didn't fight nature, they bargained with it, like old friends who understood each other's temper. The longhouses weren't scattered randomly. Each one was a statement, a place chosen for protection from wind, for access to freshwater streams, and for the view of passing ships. Standing outside, you realize how the structure itself mirrors the landscape, long, low, and humble. It almost looks like a fallen ship turned upside down, its wooden ribs curving into the earth. That design wasn't poetic coincidence. It was survival, crafted from memory and need. When you walk toward the door, the smell changes. Less sea, more smoke, and damp straw. Each step on the frozen ground crunches softly, like breaking sugar crust. Your breath fogs in the air, blending with the smoke that escapes through the roof vent. The longhouse seems alive, exhaling through its smoky nostrils. You can almost imagine it dreaming, holding its people inside like a giant wooden creature protecting its cubs. At night, the world outside disappears. There are no lamps, no roads, only the ghostly shimmer of the aurora. The Vikings saw that green light as something holy, perhaps spirits dancing above the sea. It made the dark feel less empty. Sometimes they believed the lights were reflections of shields from the gods. In a world this dark, even superstition became a comfort, a reminder that someone, somewhere, was watching over them. Step closer to the walls and you'll feel the texture of turf and timber. Layers of sod stacked thick over wooden beams created insulation so strong that even the cruelest wind surrendered. Each patch of moss between logs wasn't just decoration, it was life insurance. You can almost hear the muffled conversation inside, slow, tired, but content. The walls, like the people, were built to endure, not to impress. The sea shaped every sound here. You might hear the rhythmic slosh of water against the shore, the creak of mooring ropes, the distant bark of seals. These weren't distractions, they were reassurance. To a Viking, silence was danger, a sign that the world had stopped moving. The endless hum of wind and water meant everything was still alive. It was nature's lullaby, humming softly beneath every dream. And the air carried stories. Smoke, when it escaped the chimney hole, told others you were alive. That warmth still flickered here. In winter, when the snow buried paths and the sky stayed grey for weeks, distant plumes of smoke were a kind of message. We made it through another night. You think about that. How survival itself once spoke louder than words. How even smoke was communication between lonely, frozen hearts. If you step back, you'll see the longhouse from afar, a dark shape nestled against the white. It doesn't stand out, it blends. That's the point. The Vikings didn't want to conquer the landscape, but to disappear inside it. It was humility and intelligence disguised as architecture. When the storms came, the low design made the house invisible to the fury of wind. The earth itself bent over them like a blanket. Each home was a universe of its own. The fjords, the mountains, and the sea might define the borders. But inside those walls, life pulsed with laughter, arguments, and quiet prayers. You begin to realize that what they built wasn't just shelter, it was continuity, a way to remind the next sunrise that someone was still waiting for it. That thought alone makes the cold outside seem softer. Sometimes you think of how strange it is, how a people so famous for raiding could build something so gentle. The Longhouse was not a warrior's hall of gold, but a refuge of wood, wool, and patience. It was more nursery than throne room. You feel that contradiction resting in every plank, ferocity wrapped in tenderness. The same hands that swung axes could cradle a newborn by the firelight hours later. When you finally step inside, the door closes like a sigh behind you. The world outside dissolves. The wind becomes a memory. Ahead, the air glows with ember light. The Longhouse welcomes you, not as a guest, but as part of its breathing, flickering body. For now, you belong to the warmth. Soon, you'll learn how it feels to live, eat, and dream beneath these beams of smoke and fur. The first thing you feel inside is the heat, thick, almost tangible, wrapping around your chest like an embrace. It smells of peat, resin, and cooked meat. Every longhouse had its central fire, the literal heart of the home. It burned day and night, tended carefully, because letting it die meant more than losing heat. It meant breaking rhythm, breaking life itself. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was memory, community, and prayer. You can see the flame flickering low, smoke curling lazily upward through the roof vent. There was no chimney, only a hole. The air is smoky, sometimes suffocating, but familiar. Your eyes water, but you stay close. The smoke stains everything, the beams, the fur, even the hair of those sitting nearby, but it also drives away insects and preserves meat. Comfort, it seems, always came with a little sting to the eyes. Families sat around the fire in layers. Elders closest to the center, children on the edges. The warmth didn't reach equally, much like life itself. But no one complained. They had learned to share heat the way they shared food. The closer you sat, the more you carried stories. Elders told them like they were breathing, of gods, storms, and long voyages. To a Viking child, bedtime wasn't quiet. It was myth in motion. Furs lay everywhere, thick pelts from bears, wolves, and reindeer spread like soft shadows over benches and floors. The texture under your hand is coarse but alive. It smells of animal musk and smoke. These weren't luxury items, they were survival tools. Even the poorest Viking had something between his body and the cold earth. The richest simply had more layers. Warmth was the only wealth that mattered at midnight. You notice the constant crackle of wood, rhythmically uneven, hypnotic. It fills the pauses between conversations, creating a pattern almost like breathing. Outside, wind howls. Inside, the fire answers in pops and sighs. It's a language only old houses understand. You think about how, in modern life, we chase quiet. Here, they chased sound. The sound that meant life continued. Even a hiss from a wet log felt reassuring. The smoke gathers high above, making the rafters disappear into haze. Sometimes, when the door opens, a cold draft sweeps through, twisting the smoke into ghostly shapes. Children giggle, imagining spirits dancing above. The Norse believed ancestors visited in the night wind, especially near the hearth. So, when a log cracked suddenly, they smiled and murmured, "They're listening." You feel the same comfort now, that maybe someone beyond the dark still watches. Food always simmered on the fire. Stew thick with barley, roots, and bits of salted fish. The smell is earthy, smoky, faintly sweet. The Vikings weren't feasting every night. Most meals were humble, heavy, and shared from a single pot. Eating was less about hunger and more about rhythm. The act itself marked the passing of hours, just as fire marked the passing of seasons. It was routine turned into ritual. When someone stirred the pot, sparks leapt upward like golden snow. The fire pit was more than cooking space, it was social gravity. Everyone rotated around it, not because of hierarchy, but necessity. Even chieftains sat cross-legged by the same flames as thralls. Here, heat erased titles. For a few hours each night, the world shrank to orange light, crackling wood, and slow breath. In that, there was equality and peace. The longhouse was dark, yet comforting. Light came only from the fire and a few oil lamps made from fish fat. They smoked badly and smelled worse. But you learned not to mind. Darkness wasn't scary. It was softness. It taught you to see with your ears and skin. You began to measure comfort not in brightness, but in warmth. That's a lesson most of us forget until the lights go out. Sometimes, in the stillness, a lullaby drifted through the air. Simple, repetitive, sung low to blend with the fire's hum. You imagine it now, the notes thick with smoke, the singer's voice rough but gentle. It wasn't about melody, it was about endurance. The song said, "We are still here." Every family had one, passed down like an heirloom. Music, like warmth, was a form of survival disguised as art. As night deepened, people settled where they were. No one needed privacy. Warmth was the only boundary. You can picture it. Bodies close, breaths overlapping, the rhythm of dozens of lives sinking into one gentle noise. In that moment, You realize why these people could survive where others froze. They lived like embers in a fire, together, glowing faintly, keeping each other alive through the long northern dark. And so, as the wind outside grows fiercer, the fire answers softly. The longhouse feels smaller now, safer. You sit back, fur against your cheek, smoke above your eyes, the faint hum of a lullaby in your ears. The night stretches on, but you're no longer counting hours. You're part of the warmth. One more quiet flame among many. And in this ancient place, that's all survival ever meant. The air inside the longhouse clings to your skin, thick with smoke and the faint sting of iron tools drying by the fire. You glance around and notice how every Viking is wrapped in layers that look heavy but move easily. Wool tunics, linen shirts, fur cloaks, sometimes even bits of leather patched with sinew. Clothes here aren't decoration. They are armor against cold, woven stories of sheep, flax, and trade across the sea. When you touch the wool, it feels coarse but warm, a texture that holds memory. Vikings spun their own thread on spindles made from bone or stone, twisting fibers while talking, gossiping or humming to the rhythm of chores. Every strand represented time. Sometimes they dyed them with roots or lichen, creating browns, greys, and soft reds. Their colors weren't bright. They belonged to the earth. Even beauty bowed to practicality here. The air smells faintly of lanolin and sweat, that honest mix of life without perfume. In the corner, you notice a woman patching a torn sleeve with delicate, careful stitches. Needles were precious, often carved from fishbone or bronze. Clothing wasn't thrown away, it was reborn again and again. Each stitch whispered the same stubborn prayer, not today, cold, not tonight. You realize then, resilience was their fashion statement. Even jewelry had its function. Iron brooches and bronze clasps didn't just shine in firelight, they held cloaks in place and fastened tunics. Some pieces carried runes for luck or love. They jingled softly when people moved, like small, metallic heartbeats. You hear them now, faint in the hum of the room. Proof that beauty still existed, even when survival demanded all your attention. A quiet defiance hidden in bronze and smoke. Shoes were simple, made from a single piece of leather folded and stitched around the foot. When soaked by rain, they were stuffed with straw for warmth. It's strange to imagine warriors who crossed oceans wearing shoes that barely survived puddles. But comfort was never the goal. Function ruled every decision. The sea didn't care if your boots looked impressive. It only cared if you could stand your ground. There was a faint rhythm to dressing and undressing. People didn't change clothes daily. Fabric was too precious. Instead, they layered for warmth, shedding one piece at a time as they lay by the fire. You can hear the rustle of fabric, the small sigh of relief when cold skin meets fur. It's intimacy without romance. Survival through shared warmth. The human body becomes another hearth in the dark. You watch a man cleaning his tunic with a small knife, scraping off dried mud. Laundry wasn't done with soap or rivers. Instead, clothes were beaten with sticks or brushed with snow to remove dirt. The smell of smoke replaced the smell of sweat, blending everyone into the scent of the house itself. You might wrinkle your nose now, but here, that smell meant safety. Proof that warmth still existed. Metal clasps glint faintly in the firelight. Each piece of iron was expensive, hard-won from trade or raids. Vikings prized iron like we prize technology. You see a boy polishing a small blade, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, squinting at his reflection, distorted by smoke. Vanity still sneaks through even in the north, a reminder that humanity doesn't disappear in the cold, it just adapts. Children wore miniature versions of adult clothes, sometimes patched from their parents' old garments. A tunic, too long, became an heirloom. When a child outgrew it, it passed to the next one, softened by years of use. The fabric carried not just warmth, but memory. You can imagine the stories stitched into every seam: laughter, crying, first steps by the firelight. Nothing was wasted, not even sentiment. At night, people loosened their belts and cloaks, but rarely stripped completely. The idea of comfort didn't mean softness. It meant readiness. You slept half-dressed, half alert, always ready for cold, fire, or sudden guests. The Longhouse taught everyone to rest without surrender. Even dreams had a guard at the door. And somehow, that tension made rest feel more valuable, like earning sleep instead of finding it. When the air turned colder, they wrapped their feet in rags and tucked them close to their bodies under fur. The warmth was shared like a secret, moving from person to person until the chill retreated. You can almost feel that. The weight of fabric, the press of skin, the comfort of proximity. It's not luxury, it's loyalty. The body itself became part of the architecture of survival. And through it all, the sound of crackling fire never stopped. Threads of smoke climbed upward, carrying the smell of wool, meat, and iron. You breathe it in, ancient, raw, human. In that moment, surrounded by soft laughter and creaking wood, you understand that warmth was not about fire or fur. It was about people, tangled in shared endurance, wrapped in the soft, smoky poetry of staying alive. You move toward the darker end of the Longhouse, where the firelight fades into shadow. The air cools, and the smell shifts. Less smoke, more hay, and damp earth. This is where people slept. There were no separate rooms, no privacy curtains, just raised wooden platforms running along the walls. Layers of straw and moss covered them, topped with animal skins and woven blankets. It looks rough, but somehow inviting. When you sit on one of those beds, the surface compresses with a soft, earthy sigh. Moss gave a natural cushioning that smelled faintly of pine and soil. Sometimes, dried herbs like lavender or thyme were mixed in to keep away insects, a small touch of luxury in a world that had no pillows. The Vikings didn't crave softness, they craved warmth. Comfort wasn't bought, it was built with hands and patience. You notice how the sleeping spaces are shared. Families, friends, and sometimes even guests huddled together in these narrow bunks. The heat of bodies created a microclimate of survival. There was no your side or my side, only a collective breath rising and falling in rhythm. In that darkness, community wasn't a concept, it was a temperature. You feel it even now, like the ghost of shared warmth brushing your skin. Children slept nearest to the fire, tucked between parents or grandparents. Their dreams were guarded by walls of wool and whispers. The elderly slept near the door, both for cool air and because they were light sleepers, the first to notice danger. Even sleep here had hierarchy, but not from power. It came from practicality. Every placement had logic, the same way the stars had their order above the roof. In some homes, dogs slept at people's feet, adding extra warmth. Their fur carried the outside world in: sea salt, snow, and soil. You hear one now, curling into a ball, sighing through its nose as the flames dim. That sound, soft and faithful, was part of the Viking night symphony. Humans and animals shared not just space, but survival, each one protecting the other in silence. The longhouse never truly slept. There was always a cough, a whisper, a shifting body. The fire hissed, the wind answered, and the beams creaked like old bones. Sleep was not a full escape, but a truce with the dark. You drifted in and out, half aware of warmth, half aware of cold. Dreams blurred with waking moments. Sometimes you didn't know where one ended and the other began. You might think the lack of privacy was exhausting, but for them, it was comfort. Solitude meant danger. Silence meant death. So they found peace in proximity. Every sigh, every rustle of cloth, every shared breath reminded them they weren't alone. You begin to wonder, maybe our modern quiet is lonelier than their crowded nights. Maybe peace once sounded like dozens of people breathing together. At dawn, the straw smelled faintly of smoke and sweat, a mixture that signaled life, not filth. People woke slowly, stretching under heavy furs, blinking against the first cold light filtering through roof cracks. The air was pale and misty. Someone stirred the fire back to life, adding a log. You can almost see the orange glow return, a sunrise born from wood instead of sky. Every morning, they shook out the furs, cleaned the bedding, and replaced the moss when it grew damp. It wasn't hygiene in the modern sense, it was rhythm. Maintenance was meditation. Even sweeping straw became ritual, a way to reset the space for another night. You begin to understand that this cycle, clean, rest, repeat, was what kept their sanity intact through endless winters. The smell of breakfast often replaced the scent of sleep. Barley porridge or smoked fish reheated over the same fire that had guarded them through the night. The taste wasn't fancy, but it was steady. In this life, steadiness was salvation. They didn't wake chasing excitement, they woke chasing balance. Each sunrise was less about ambition and more about gratitude for surviving the dark. When you lie back again, imagining yourself under those heavy furs, you feel a weight that isn't just physical, it's ancestral. You're lying in the echo of centuries of endurance, of simple persistence against frost and silence. The walls hum softly with the memory of thousands of breaths. You close your eyes and realize, in this place, rest was not escape. It was worship. Outside, the sea wind sighs, brushing against the turf roof. The longhouse seems to breathe with you, its ancient rhythm matching your own. The smell of smoke, the murmur of distant waves, the slow warmth spreading through fur. Everything becomes one long, quiet heartbeat. You let yourself drift with it, sinking deeper into that calm, smoky universe where survival and serenity are the same thing. The longhouse never knew silence. Even now, if you listen carefully, you can hear its breathing, the soft crackle of fire, the shifting of straw, a murmur of voices floating just above sleep. These sounds wove together like a lullaby for the living. In a world without clocks, the rhythm of sound was the rhythm of time itself. Noise meant warmth. Quiet meant the cold had won. The fire's song was constant. Each log gave its own voice. One hissed with trapped sap. Another snapped like a whip. People could tell what wood was burning just by listening. Birch whispered, pine popped, oak growled low and deep. The fire spoke a language everyone understood. It told them when to stir the stew, when to add another branch, when to whisper prayers to the gods of warmth. Children learned to sleep through everything, coughing, laughter, and the wind clawing at the roof. Sometimes, when storms grew wild, snow blew in through the cracks and hissed as it hit the coals. The sound was sharp, fleeting, like a sigh from the gods themselves. In that strange mix of chaos and comfort, you could never forget how fragile warmth really was. It demanded attention. It demanded care. Every sound had purpose. The scrape of a wooden bowl against stone meant someone was eating. The ring of metal against metal told of repair. A knife sharpened, an iron buckle mended. Even the low hum of conversation carried meaning. People didn't waste words in the North. When they spoke, it was either to share news, to comfort, or to laugh the dark away. The Longhouse was an orchestra of survival. There was always a hum of creation, someone carving wood, someone spinning wool, someone telling half a story that another finished. These small, continuous noises filled the Longhouse like breath fills a chest. You begin to notice how these people didn't chase silence. They built peace inside the noise. It's different from the quiet of loneliness. This was the quiet of belonging, where sound held you gently. Outside, wind rattled the wooden planks. Inside, people answered with steady voices. Sometimes they sang softly, work songs, lullabies, or verses honoring Thor and Freya. The notes rose and fell with the wind, weaving human breath into the music of nature. The Vikings didn't separate life from the elements. They blended with them. You can almost feel that, your pulse syncing with the rhythm of storm and song. Dogs barked, roosters crowed, sheep stirred in nearby pens. The farm was an extension of the home. Every animal had its sound, and each one carried reassurance. Life continues. Even the creak of the roof beams was familiar, almost friendly. The wood groaned like an old storyteller, clearing his throat before another tale. To live here was to learn that sound was the soul of endurance. Sometimes the loudest noise was laughter. You wouldn't expect it, but even in winter's longest nights, the Longhouse echoed with humor, jokes, stories, teasing remarks shared over bowls of stew. Vikings laughed at the sea, at the cold, at themselves. Laughter was rebellion, a way to remind the dark that it could never fully win. You can hear it now, muffled but bright, like sparks bursting from a log. The air trembles with movement, someone tossing wood onto the fire, someone turning in their sleep. These are the sounds of life continuing without ceremony. They form a pattern, predictable and soothing. You could close your eyes and know exactly what hour it is by the creak of the benches or the crack of the hearth. That predictability was peace. That was safety. When you listen long enough, even the chaos becomes rhythm. The Viking night teaches you that peace doesn't require quiet. It requires familiarity. The same noises that once startled you now feel like heartbeat and breath. The Longhouse hums, a living creature of smoke, laughter, and wood. And as your senses adjust, you realize that stillness here isn't the absence of sound. It's the acceptance of it. Outside, the world howls in darkness. Inside, someone stirs the coals. A faint orange glow returns, like a whisper, saying, "We're still here." That phrase repeats in your head, an echo carried through centuries. In this place, survival is never loud. It hums softly in the background, steady as fire, gentle as sleep. You feel yourself sinking into that rhythm, matching your breath to the pulse of the ancient house. Soon, your ears no longer strain to hear. You simply exist within the soundscape, woven into the tapestry of crackles, murmurs, and sighs. You belong to the longhouse now, as much as its walls, as much as its warmth. The noises that once seemed strange now feel sacred. The music of survival plays on, and you drift with it, carried by smoke and memory toward the edge of rest. As the night deepens, you begin to notice how order exists even here, beneath fur and flame. The longhouse isn't chaos. It's structured, not by written rules, but by understanding. Every person knows where to sit, when to speak, how to move. The rhythm of their life depends on unspoken hierarchy, shaped by age, skill, and story. Its quiet power, glowing softly like embers. The chieftain, or household leader, sits nearest the central fire. Not because they demand it, but because they carry responsibility. They must wake first, sleep last, and answer any knock at the door. Around them gather kin, warriors, and guests, each placement saying something about loyalty or debt. You realize how this arrangement isn't about control, it's about balance. A fire burns evenly only when logs are carefully arranged. Elders hold authority through memory. Their words weigh more than weapons. In the dim firelight, you can see their faces. Weathered, calm, eyes reflecting both flame and frost. They've seen storms destroy crops and wars swallow suns, yet they speak softly, never shouting. In Viking life, volume was weakness, restraint was strength. You feel that lesson sink into you like heat through fur. The young sit closer to the edges, where the air is colder. Not as punishment, but as initiation. They're expected to listen, to observe, to wait for their turn in the warmth. Every night is a lesson in patience. Someday, when they've earned enough scars and stories, they'll move inward, literally and symbolically. The Longhouse was both school and sanctuary, its architecture teaching through experience. Even slaves or thralls had their place near the walls. Though bound to service, they weren't invisible. They tended fires, cleaned furs, and served meals, but at night, they too shared in the communal warmth. For a few hours between dusk and dawn, class blurred. The fire equalized everything. You can almost see it, shadows mixing together until hierarchy fades beneath the glow of survival. Meals reinforced the same quiet order. Food was passed clockwise, starting from the chieftain and ending with the youngest child. No one touched their portion until everyone had something. There's a rhythm to generosity here, a calm, deliberate act that says, we endure together. You take a bite of that imaginary stew, and somehow it tastes like belonging, smoky and simple. Even the tools around you tell the story of rank. A polished sword might hang behind the chieftain's seat, not for use, but as symbol. Meanwhile, a wooden ladle or a carved comb carries equal weight. Both are instruments of life. The Vikings didn't glorify wealth for its shine, but for its usefulness. That mindset feels ancient and refreshing, like honesty carved into oak. At night, when stories begin, hierarchy fades. Even a thrall could make others laugh, and a chieftain could weep at an old tale. The fire leveled everyone in its flickering democracy. You watch as light dances over faces, proud, tired, tender. For a moment, rank dissolves. All that remains is humanity, gathered in warmth against a cold that doesn't care about status. Still, respect remains. You feel it in the way people move, careful not to block another's heat, not to speak over the elder's voice. Manners born of necessity become culture. There's grace in this simplicity, etiquette forged from empathy, not vanity. Maybe true civilization isn't gold or architecture, but knowing exactly how far to sit from another person in the firelight. When guests arrive, they're treated like family, offered stew and a place by the flame before questions are asked. Hospitality here isn't kindness, it's law. In lands where death waits outside the door, generosity becomes armor. You imagine strangers shaking the cold from their cloaks, their faces thawing in warmth. Every visit is a quiet miracle, proof that the world still contains gentleness. And so the Longhouse continues, order without oppression, equality without chaos. Everyone has their place, everyone contributes. The fire burns not because of one person, but because of all. You feel that truth resting inside you. Hierarchy here isn't ladder, but circle. The heat spreads evenly when everyone tends it. That lesson glows brighter than the flames themselves. Outside, frost creeps along the edges of the walls, whispering against the turf. Inside, people breathe, shift, and settle once more into the calm hum of night. The order remains unspoken, the fire steady. You let the rhythm carry you. Warmth, hierarchy, belonging. It's all the same language here, spoken in smoke and silence. You close your eyes and sink deeper into the Longhouse dream. The Longhouse glows low now, its fire breathing in slow rhythm. Shadows stretch across the beams like long fingers, and the murmurs around the hearth grow softer. This is when stories begin, not written ones but spoken, living tales. You hear the old men clear their throats, the crackle of wood setting tempo for myth. In a world without books, the fire was the library, and the storytellers were its keepers. You feel the way the air shifts when a story starts. A quiet excitement spreads like warmth through fur. Children lean forward, their eyes bright in the half-dark, while adults nod slowly, half listening, half remembering. The words flow like honey mixed with smoke, slow and heavy, sinking into the wood and straw. Stories weren't entertainment, they were navigation, maps for the soul when the sea outside swallowed all stars. The tales rarely began with heroes, they began with storms, gods and mistakes. A fisherman angered Aegir, god of the sea, and lost his boat. A woman tricked a troll, but forgot to thank the moon. These weren't moral lessons, they were warnings dressed in poetry. In the north, nature wasn't conquered. It was bargained with, feared, and sometimes kissed. You realize, and the stories were survival manuals with better metaphors. Each story carried sound. The voice of the storyteller rose and fell like tide water, carrying rhythm older than memory. Even the fire seemed to respond, hissing on certain names, glowing brighter on others. The Norse believed words held magic. To speak was to shape the world. And here, inside these smoky walls, you can almost feel that truth vibrating against your skin. Some stories drifted toward gods, Odin, the Wanderer, Thor, the Storm, Freya, whose tears became gold. The gods weren't distant, They walked among them, flawed and restless. A sudden creak in the rafters might be Odin passing through, listening for good tales. A gust of wind might be Loki's laughter. You find yourself glancing toward the roof, half expecting to see a shadow smiling back. Humor always crept in, even in the most sacred tales. Someone tripped over a goat or mistook a log for a serpent. The Vikings understood something we often forget, that laughter doesn't disrespect gods, it invites them closer. To laugh at a storm was to prove you weren't afraid of it. You can almost hear it now, laughter blending with thunder in the distance, bold and foolish, yet human. The longhouse fills with warmth again, not just from the fire, but from shared imagination. The smell of smoke thickens as if to seal the story inside the air. Every listener contributes to it, nodding, murmuring, adding small phrases like "I" or "so it was." The story becomes a collective heartbeat. You realize they weren't passive listeners. They were co-creators, weaving belief and breath into each tale. Sometimes, between stories, silence would fall, but it wasn't empty. It was sacred, like the pause between waves. In that quiet, you could hear the fires crackle and the soft breathing of those drifting towards sleep. The storyteller would look around, smiling faintly, knowing his work had already begun its next life inside their dreams. That's how history truly survived, in whispers, not ink. Even when the stories repeated, no one complained. Each telling carried a slightly different shape, molded by mood, weather, or the way the fire burned that night. Consistency didn't matter, continuity did. The story might bend, but it never broke. You realized that repetition wasn't boredom here, it was comfort. The same rhythm, the same heroes, the same gods, a lullaby made of legend. Somewhere, an old woman begins a tale of Yggdrasil, the world tree. Her voice is slow, rough as bark. She speaks of its roots wrapping around the underworld, of its leaves touching heaven. As she speaks, smoke swirls upward like branches. For a moment, the longhouse becomes the tree itself. Roots in earth, leaves in sky, and you, a small thought sleeping in between. The night deepens. The storyteller's voice softens until it blends with the fire. Faces blur, heads rest on furs, the air thick with dreams of gods and sea monsters. You realize that, long before bedtime stories, this was humanity's first way of falling asleep, by believing. The tale ends, but the warmth remains. The silence that follows feels like the world taking a long, satisfied breath. And so you sit there, watching the embers fade, thinking about how words once meant survival, how stories built walls stronger than stone, how belief filled bellies better than bread. You smile faintly, and because even now, centuries later, you're still doing the same thing. Listening to a story, waiting for the dark to turn kind. The next night begins the same way. Cold wind outside, soft fire inside. But tonight there's something sweeter in the air. You smell honey warming over the flames, thick and golden, bubbling softly in an iron pot. Mead. The drink of the north. You can almost taste it before it touches your tongue. Part sugar, part smoke, part memory. The Vikings didn't drink to escape. They drank to remember less painfully. The first sip burned softly, tracing warmth down your chest. Mead was made from honey, water, and yeast, sometimes flavored with herbs or berries. Simple ingredients. Yet the taste carried power. It reminded people that summer once existed, that flowers had bloomed somewhere beyond the frost. Drinking was a seasonal rebellion, liquid sunlight bottled for the longest nights. You can feel that defiance spread through you, slow and golden. Sharing mead was ritual, not indulgence. Cups passed hand to hand, lips touching the same rim. It wasn't about hygiene, it was about unity. Each sip erased distance between people, warriors and weavers, elders and children, all joined by the same fire, the same honey heat. It wasn't intoxication they sought, but belonging. The buzz that followed was less from alcohol, more from acceptance. The smell deepens as the pot simmers, caramelized sweetness laced with wood smoke. It clings to the walls, the hair, the fur. Mead was the perfume of Viking nights. Sometimes herbs like bog myrtle were added for bitterness, balancing pleasure with realism, a very northern idea. Life was never too sweet here. Even joy came salted with wind. You smile, because that honesty feels almost poetic. Songs rise as the cups empty, not loud or wild, but rhythmic, almost prayerful. They sing of voyages, lost friends, and the promise of spring. Their voices tremble in harmony with the flames, as if the fire itself hums along. You realize how these gatherings weren't escape from hardship. They were rehearsals for hope. The act of drinking became a reminder that warmth, like joy, multiplies when shared. Someone toasts to Odin, raising a horn carved with runes. The gesture is slow, deliberate. For wisdom, they say, and the fire answers with a crack. Another drinks for love, another for the sea, another for silence itself. You begin to notice. Every toast here means something sacred. They drink not for forgetting, but for honoring what must never be forgotten. As the night deepens, laughter spills through the smoke. Someone mispronounces a god's name, another jokes about being turned into a fish. The longhouse trembles with mirth. There's no shame in joy here. Even the gods were known to laugh until their sides ached. The Vikings treated happiness as an act of courage. To laugh in the cold was to tell winter it had no dominion over your heart. You can taste the shift in air as the mead works its quiet magic. Eyes grow glassy, voices soften. Stories turn slower. Words blend with sighs. There's no chaos, only warmth stretching into contentment. Mead wasn't about losing control, it was about loosening the grip of worry. For a few hours, life became simple again. Fire, honey, laughter, and the rhythm of cups against wood. The fire burns lower now, its light flickering against faces that have forgotten fear. Someone hums a tune you don't know, low and circular, almost hypnotic. The sound mingles with the crackle of wood and the faint rattle of cups. You close your eyes and feel the mead's warmth pulse behind your ribs. A heartbeat borrowed from sunlight long gone. Outside, snow begins to fall. Each flake hits the roof with a soft patter, like applause from the sky. Inside, the laughter fades into murmurs, and the mead pot empties. People lean on each other, speaking less, smiling more. This is the real intoxication. Stillness shared between tired souls. The drink didn't make them louder, it made them gentler. The last embers glow faintly beneath ash. Someone whispers a prayer to Bragi, god of poetry, thanking him for words well spoken and silences well kept. You realize that even drunkenness had grace here. They never drank to forget who they were, only to forgive what life demanded of them. The final sip tastes like peace, like smoke and honey and the quiet after laughter. And when sleep finally comes, it arrives not like collapse, but like surrender. The mead lingers on their tongues, the warmth on their skin. Outside, the storm continues, but inside, hearts beat slow and steady. In that rhythm, in that honeyed silence, you understand. Even the fiercest people in history needed softness. They just found it at the bottom of a shared cup. The morning smells of ash and damp wool. A pale light filters through the smoke hole, grey and gentle, illuminating dust that dances like snowflakes. The Longhouse wakes not with alarms, but with motion. The scrape of wooden bowls, the low groan of stretching bodies, the sigh of furs being folded. You feel it more than hear it. The slow heartbeat of a household preparing for another day of endurance. Someone stirs the ashes, coaxing out the first flame. The crackle sounds like breathing after sleep. Fire must never die. It's treated almost like a member of the family. Children learn early how to feed it without suffocating it, how to speak softly near it. In a world where warmth was life, fire demanded reverence. Even embers were cradled with tenderness, glowing like sleeping gods. The smell of breakfast soon fills the air. Barley porridge thick and smoky, cooked in the same pot that once held mead. There's a faint sweetness to it, as if yesterday's laughter clings to the spoon. Meals here are simple and slow. People eat sitting close together, speaking only in low tones. Every bite is measured, not from scarcity, but from respect. Food was work transformed into gratitude. After eating, the rhythm begins. Men check their tools, sharpening axes or patching nets. Women spin wool, the spindle twirling like a quiet clock, marking time. The air hums with purpose, and every sound becomes part of the same living orchestra. You can feel the peace in repetition, the comfort of knowing exactly what needs to be done, exactly how it will sound, smell, and end. The children chase each other near the door, giggling until someone hisses, "Enough." Their laughter bounces off the wood and dies softly in the smoke. Even play has a rhythm here, bursts of light before the next wave of quiet. You notice how every action flows without friction. There are no schedules, no bells, no separation between life and work. Time here isn't counted, it's felt. The Longhouse breathes with its people. When someone pounds grain, the walls echo faintly. When wool is combed, the sound is like soft rain. When metal strikes metal, the note rings sharp and bright, reminding everyone that outside still waits. The sea, the hunt, the threat. Work, in its endless cycle, is both preparation and prayer. You realize they didn't labor to live, they lived through labor. Sometimes, as tools click and smoke curls upward, someone begins to sing. Not loudly, just enough to mark rhythm. The tune loops endlessly, its lyrics simple: boats, storms, harvests, love. The melody isn't meant to impress, it's meant to endure. In that looping sound, people find focus, almost hypnosis. The Longhouse becomes a metronome, pulsing softly between creation and rest. A woman kneels to mend a boot by firelight. Her hands move slowly, practiced, threading sinew through thick leather. You notice her expression, not boredom, not joy, but presence. Every stitch seems to belong to the world, to time itself. There's something sacred about such small tasks. the kind of holiness born from routine. You realize that peace isn't found in stillness, but in motion repeated with meaning. By midday, light seeps faintly through cracks in the wall, golden as watered mead. The air smells of wood shavings and burnt grain. Someone opens the door to fetch water, and cold air rushes in, carrying salt and frost. It stings your face but feels refreshing. Even the cold is a collaborator here, a reminder of what the walls protect you from. Nature, harsh and beautiful, is always part of the room. As the day stretches, you notice how work softens the house rather than hardens it. Every sound blends into a lullaby of productivity, the steady rhythm of a world that refuses haste. You realize how foreign silence must have felt to them, how dangerous idleness seemed. Rest would come later, after effort had earned it. For now, motion itself was warmth. Work was the fire of the waking hours. Evening returns quietly. The last clang of metal fades, replaced by the hiss of stew reheating. People lean closer to the fire again, their eyes tired but soft. The cycle continues. Fire, food, rest, fire again. It's repetition, yes, but it feels eternal, like the heartbeat of the world itself. You understand now why the Vikings endured. They built peace from predictability. And as you sit within that rhythm, you begin to feel it guiding your own breath. Steady, unhurried, ancient. The workday fades into hums, sighs, and warmth. The fire settles, the longhouse exhales, and you realize you're not just observing history. You're listening to the pulse of human persistence. Slow, smoky, eternal. When you think of Vikings, you imagine steel, not softness. Yet inside the longhouse, tenderness lives quietly, disguised beneath wool and smoke. The air itself seems to carry traces of it. A hand brushing a shoulder, a shared blanket, a silent glance that means we survived another day. In a place where words froze before reaching the door, affection had to learn new languages. You see a woman untangling her child's hair by the fire. Her fingers move gently, pulling knots free without complaint. She hums a tune you've heard before, low and circular, a melody that exists only to fill the silence between heartbeats. The child leans back, eyes half closed, safe in the rhythm. You realize that love here wasn't spoken often. It was proven through repetition. A man returns from outside, his cloak heavy with frost. Without speaking, his wife takes it, shakes it out, and hangs it near the fire. He sits, silent, steam rising from his boots. They don't embrace, yet the air between them feels full of it. That wordless comfort of two people who have shared 1,000 winters. In the north, love didn't shout, it endured. Friendship, too, had its rituals. Men clasped wrists instead of hands, eyes steady, grip firm. That contact meant trust, a vow more binding than ink. In a world of danger, friendship was currency and armor. You can see it in how they laughed together, slapping shoulders, sharing bowls of stew. Even humor was affection. Every joke was a candle lit against the cold. Elders showed care through stories, through patience. When a child asked a question, they answered slowly, savoring each word like a sip of mead. Their kindness wasn't sentimental, it was instructive. To teach was to love, to remember was to protect. You can almost feel that gaze, heavy, wise, forgiving. It's the kind of love that doesn't need smiles to exist. Romance flickered quietly, like embers under ash. Lovers sat close at night, knees brushing under furs. They didn't exchange many words. They didn't need to. A shared glance across the fire could mean more than any poem. Passion here wasn't a performance. It was survival in another form. Warmth borrowed from another heartbeat. You realize that in this cold, even love had to be practical. Sometimes affection appeared as humor. A teasing remark about burnt stew, a mock complaint about snoring too loud. These small exchanges were the thread that held sanity together. You can almost hear the chuckles ripple through the air, soft and tired but genuine. The laughter doesn't rise, Mina, it drifts, like smoke, slow and affectionate. Animals were part of that affection too. A dog's head resting on a knee, a cat curling near the hearth. People spoke to them as if they understood, and perhaps they did. The animals knew who was gentle, who fed them, who whispered during storms. Their loyalty was another form of warmth, one that didn't need fire to glow. Even the act of tending the dead carried love. When someone passed, their body was washed, wrapped in cloth, and laid with care. No rush, no fear, only reverence. The longhouse would fall silent, not from grief, but from respect. You feel that hush in your chest, a pause that says, "Thank you for enduring." In this world, death wasn't the end of warmth, it was its memory. Love here was rarely grand. It was in the details. A bowl filled first for someone else, a blanket shared, a story told twice because a child fell asleep before the end. It was the kind of affection that didn't need recognition, only continuation. You can almost feel its quiet weight, steady, ancient, unbroken. And as the night deepens, you realize that the strongest bonds are built where comfort is rare. In the Viking Longhouse, love wasn't soft, but it was certain. It moved through the smoke like a heartbeat, unseen, but always there. You close your eyes, hearing the steady hum of fire and breath, and feel the ancient warmth of humanity itself, raw, resilient, and infinite. The fire has burned low again, and with its fading light, the house begins to feel larger, the shadows stretching into strange shapes. You can almost sense it, that silent hour when the warmth weakens and the imagination wakes. In the Viking Longhouse, fear lived quietly beside comfort. It was a companion, not an enemy. Every creak in the roof, every whisper of wind had meaning. The Norse called the deepest hours Ulfhedin time, the hour of the wolf. It was when hunters and spirits alike wandered freely. People rarely ventured outside then. The dark was a realm of uncertain guests. You hear it now, a distant howl blending with the sea wind, low and haunting. To modern ears, it's beautiful. To them, it was a reminder. Even gods slept lightly. Children listened wide-eyed as elders spoke of spirits. Draugr, the restless dead, who guarded their treasures and refused peace. They were not ghosts of regret, but of greed. Sometimes, when the floor creaked near the door, someone would whisper, "The Draugr stirs." Yet fear was handled calmly, almost politely. The Vikings didn't scream at monsters. They greeted them like bad weather, inevitable, but manageable. To ward off spirits, iron nails were hammered into beams, charcoal runes were drawn near door frames, faint and crooked in the smoke. You can still imagine the marks under your fingertips, small scratches of hope against the wood. Fire was protection, but so was belief. Every superstition was a kind of shield, forged not in iron but in imagination. The air inside grows thicker as you think of it, smoke curling upward like phantom shapes. Sometimes people said the fire talked. A sudden pop meant a spirit had passed through. A long hiss meant someone far away was speaking your name. Whether you believed it or not didn't matter. The story itself kept you alert, kept your senses alive. Fear became a teacher dressed as myth. Outside, the night hums. The sea is never silent. You can hear the waves slapping against frozen shorelines, rhythmic and endless. To the Vikings, that sound was both comfort and threat. The ocean gave and took without mercy. Sailors prayed to Aegir before sleeping, asking him to spare their dreams from drowning. You realize then, even their fears had rituals shaped like small prayers to chaos. Animals reacted first. Dogs lifted their heads, ears twitching toward sounds humans couldn't hear. That was enough to send a shiver through the room. Someone would reach for a charm, whispering old words. Fear didn't need proof here. It only needed sound. You can almost feel the tension settle like a wave of breath shared by everyone at once, waiting for calm to return. And when calm did return, it felt earned. The fire popped again, laughter followed, and someone muttered, "Just the gods playing dice." That was the Viking way, humor as defense. Instead of denying the dark, they teased it. Fear became less frightening when shared in jest. You find yourself smiling too, because it's the same instinct humans still use centuries later. The children drift back to sleep, trusting the adults to keep watch. And indeed, one or two always stayed awake. Not guards exactly, but caretakers of the flame. You can picture them sitting quietly, cloak around shoulders, staring into the embers as if reading the future there. The rest of the longhouse sleeps, wrapped in furs and dreams, unaware of the eyes that protect them from nothing and everything at once. That watchful silence has its own rhythm. The occasional cough, the sound of wood settling, the faint whistle of wind under the door. Time moves differently here. Minutes stretch, and thoughts grow heavier. The watcher's mind drifts between prayer and memory. He doesn't fear the dark anymore. He's become part of it. You can almost feel that same trance slipping over you. When dawn finally stains the smoke hole pale blue, fear retreats with the stars. The watcher stirs the coals again, smiling faintly as warmth returns. The longhouse wakes, unaware that it was ever in danger. Perhaps it never was. Perhaps fear itself was the guardian, a reminder to keep the fire alive. You exhale slowly, feeling the truth of that settle deep inside you. And as the new day hums to life, the memory of the night lingers, not as terror, but as tenderness. Fear, here, wasn't something to defeat, it was something to honor. A soft reminder that even the bravest hearts still listen closely to the wind. Morning comes slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the peace. The longhouse smells of wet ash and bread baking on a flat stone. Someone hums an old tune while stirring the pot. Yet even in daylight, belief clings to everything, invisible but solid, like smoke in the air. The Vikings didn't separate faith from routine. Every action was a conversation with unseen forces. You see a woman trace her finger over a small carved charm hanging near the door. A Thor's hammer, simple and worn. It isn't jewelry, it's armor. Each person carried one, believing it protected against storms, spirits, and misfortune. These symbols weren't about worship, but relationship. The gods weren't distant figures. They were neighbors, sometimes helpful, sometimes rude, always watching. When someone sneezed, another quickly muttered, "High Lokesel, health and good fortune." When the fire flared too high, someone whispered thanks to Loki, hoping his mischief would move elsewhere. Even ordinary events carried weight. You realize how this faith wasn't superstition in the modern sense. It was pattern recognition made spiritual. They saw the divine hiding inside coincidence. The hearth itself was sacred. Before eating, a small piece of food was often tossed into the fire, a gift to the spirits within the flames. The crackle that followed was taken as acceptance. It was a small transaction. Warmth traded for gratitude. You can almost hear it now. The faint hiss as offering meets ember, like a whisper saying, "You're welcome." Children were taught small charms early. Knots tied in thread for luck, words murmured before travel, bits of amber kept in pockets for safety. These weren't rituals of fear, but of familiarity. To live here was to be surrounded by unpredictability, storms, illness, loss. Belief gave shape to chaos, turning uncertainty into something you could hold. When someone fell ill, healers burned herbs, their smoke swirling into the rafters. They believed the scent carried prayers upward, guiding the sickness out. You inhale, imagining the mix. Juniper, resin, pine. It smells both sharp and clean, like hope pretending to be medicine. Whether it cured or not, it comforted. And in a world like this, comfort often was the cure. Even dreams held meaning. A restless night might predict a coming visitor. A dream of fish meant hunger soon to end. No sign was ignored. The Longhouse was a world of omens, where every flicker of flame or cry of bird whispered something from beyond. You realized that such belief didn't enslave them. It connected them, making life feel threaded with purpose. During storms, people gathered closer, murmuring the names of gods under their breath. They didn't pray for the storm to stop. They prayed for strength to stand through it. Faith here wasn't about control, it was about cooperation. You can almost feel it. That quiet acceptance that some things will always belong to the wind. At night, offerings were left outside, bread, bones, bits of meat for wandering spirits. They called them landvetir, the land's hidden beings. Ignore them, and crops might fail. Respect them, and they'd guard your home. You picture it now, small plates steaming in the cold, vanishing by morning. Whether eaten by spirits or foxes didn't matter. The point was humility. In this world, faith was less about belief and more about rhythm. Every gesture, stirring stew, feeding fire, tying knots, became prayer through repetition. The Vikings didn't need temples. Their longhouses were churches of smoke and wood, their daily lives the liturgy. You realize that devotion doesn't need silence or gold, it only needs attention. And as the sun fades again, you feel that quiet awe settle in the air. The sense that life itself was a partnership between flesh and wind, between hand and invisible hand. The fire burns low, accepting its nightly offerings. Somewhere, a charm rattles gently against the wall. It's not fear you feel, it's peace. Because here, Even the unseen is familiar. The longhouse smells faintly of smoke and milk. Morning light seeps through the smoke hole, painting gold over fur and wood. Somewhere near the hearth, a baby cries, a thin, trembling sound against the steady breath of the fire. Life here begins humbly. There are no doctors, no sterile rooms, only warmth, hands, and faith. The Vikings understood birth as a quiet miracle, wrapped in the same smoke that guarded their nights. Women gather close, their movements practiced, steady. Water warms over the flame, herbs hang from the rafters, their scent soft and sharp at once, juniper, sage, thyme. The midwife wipes her hands on wool, speaking gently. There's no panic, no rush. Life arrives at its own pace. Outside, the sea wind sighs, as if echoing the baby's first breath. You realize how natural it feels, this rhythm of arrival. Once the child cries, relief ripples through the room. A wooden bowl is filled with water, a small piece of silver dropped in, a gift to the gods. The child is sprinkled, named, and welcomed with murmured words. May you grow strong, may you endure. The ceremony isn't loud or formal, it's a whisper of gratitude. You can almost hear the fire answering with a low, approving crackle. Infants were fragile, yet fiercely loved. Mothers wrapped them in wool, tucked close to the chest. The smell of skin and smoke blended, the perfume of new life in an old world. There were no toys, no lullabies carved in melody. Comfort came from heartbeat and warmth. You imagine it now. A tiny hand gripping a strand of hair, a mother humming through exhaustion. The fire, dim but steady. Life and death weren't opposites here, they were neighbors. The same fire that greeted new breath would one day burn the body when breath ended. The Vikings feared little of death. It was as familiar as hunger, as natural as dawn. They believed dying well mattered more than living long. To them, memory was immortality, and memory thrived best beside firelight and story. When death came, it wasn't hidden. The body lay among the living until preparations began. The smell of resin and smoke deepened. Pine branches were spread on the floor. The dead were washed, dressed in clean clothes, and placed near the hearth one last time. Someone always whispered, "Rest where it's warm." You can feel the quiet dignity of that. No denial, no panic, only respect. Grief didn't come in wails but in silence. Tears mixed with smoke, words with prayer. A cup of mead was poured on the ground, a drink for the departed. The Vikings didn't ask the gods to spare souls from darkness. They simply hoped their loved ones would find a familiar fire wherever they went. That belief turned death into a continuation, not an ending. Outside, a pyre crackled beneath the open sky. The smell of burning wood mingled with salt and wind. Ashes rose, carried toward the sea. The people stood quietly, their faces expressionless but their hearts heavy. In their silence, you sensed not sorrow but understanding. Fire, again, was the bridge. The same element that cooked food, forged tools, and now carried souls. Children watched without fear. Death was part of their education. They'd heard stories of Valhalla, of feasting with ancestors, of eternal fires that never went out. For them, the afterlife wasn't unknown. It was a continuation of everything they already knew. You find that strangely comforting. A belief system, that made even endings feel like homecomings. At night, when the house was quiet again, someone would mention the deceased softly, as if they still sat by the fire. And perhaps, in their way, they did. The Norse didn't draw lines between the living and the dead. Both belonged to the same story, told and retold each winter. The warmth remained. Only the bodies changed. The baby stirs again near the hearth, and the circle completes. One breath leaves, another begins. The smoke rises, the same smoke that carried prayers, laughter, and tears. In that rising haze, life feels both fragile and infinite. You breathe it in and realize this house doesn't protect against death. It teaches how to live beside it, unafraid. And as the fire hums, you feel that ancient peace settle, the kind born not from ignorance, but acceptance. In the Viking world, nothing was wasted. Not life, not death, not even the ashes. Everything returned to the same sea, the same wind, the same fire that glows beneath the fur tonight. Night falls again, quiet and silver. The air smells of salt and smoke. People settle into their beds of straw and fur, but no one truly believes the night belongs only to sleep. In the Viking Longhouse, dreams were portals, messages from ancestors, warnings from gods, or simply echoes of a mind that refused to rest. You can feel that strange tension, half comfort, half reverence. The Vikings treated dreams seriously. Each morning, over bowls of porridge, they'd share what they saw. I dreamt of crows, one might say, but meaning battle. I dreamt of waves, another murmured, meaning change. Dreams were puzzles, interpreted like weather. They weren't dismissed, they were decoded. You realize how deeply this culture listened, not just to the world outside, but to the one within. There was an art to remembering dreams. Some tied knots in leather straps before sleeping, one for each wish or question. If the knots came undone by morning, it meant the gods had answered. It sounds poetic, but also practical, a tactile way of giving shape to the unseen. You can almost feel the texture of that leather in your hand, soft and warm from the night. Sometimes people claimed they'd seen ancestors visiting in dreams, offering advice or warnings. No one doubted them. Why would they? In a world where smoke carried prayers and waves carried souls, the barrier between life and afterlife was thin. Dreams were meetings, not illusions. You can almost hear the whisper of an ancestor now, their voice blending with the crackle of fire. Seers, or völler, held special power. These were women who could read symbols, visions, and even the flight of birds. When they spoke, everyone listened. They were the Longhouses' oracles, equal parts respected and feared. Their eyes seemed to look through the walls, past the sea, into some place you could never name. Even now, the thought of that gaze makes you sit a little straighter. Not all dreams were mystical. Some were memories dressed in myth. A sailor dreaming of home, a mother hearing her child's voice before dawn. But even those small visions mattered. To the Vikings, every image held potential meaning. You couldn't ignore a dream and claim ignorance later. The gods, they believed, didn't repeat themselves. Animals appeared often. Wolves, ravens, serpents. Each had its language. A dream of wolves could mean loyalty or danger, depending on how they looked at you. Ravens were Odin's messengers, watching quietly from the edge of the mind, Snakes meant transformation, sometimes renewal, sometimes loss. You see how these people lived surrounded by metaphor, how nature spoke through everything they feared and loved. Occasionally, dreams foretold storms or battles. When those came true, the longhouse filled with awe. The dreamer wasn't praised, they were pitied, touched by something too vast to bear. The Vikings respected prophecy but never envied it. Knowing the future was like knowing the sea's temper. Useful, yes, but rarely kind. There was beauty in their acceptance of mystery. They didn't chase control over dreams or fear them. They simply listened, quietly, like students of the unknown. You can almost feel that patience settle over you, the willingness to not understand everything, to let wonder and unease coexist. By dawn, the dreams fade, carried off by smoke through the hole in the roof. The sleepers wake slowly, blinking at the grey light, trying to remember what the night whispered. Some smile, some stay silent. Either way, they rise, feed the fire, and begin again. Life continues, as it always does, carrying secrets it never needs to explain. And you, still half in their world, realize something gentle, that dreams were never meant to be solved, only shared. The Vikings understood that perfectly. Their nights weren't escapes from reality. They were conversations with it. You exhale the air warm and smoky, and drift with them, halfway between the waking world and whatever waits beyond the embers. Outside the longhouse, night and ocean blend into one endless sound, waves breaking against stone, wind threading through grass, gulls crying like lost souls above the dark. The Vikings never feared that sound. To them, the sea was both home and hunger. It took fathers, returned wealth, swallowed ships, and whispered lullabies. You stand near the doorway, and the air tastes of salt, iron, and destiny. Inside, the fire burns steady, but all talk turns to the water. Someone repairs a net, fingers moving with muscle memory. Another sharpens an oarlock, the rhythm soft and slow. Every man and woman here has someone at sea, or will be there soon. The ocean was never a choice, it was an inheritance. Even the land smelled of tide. You can almost hear the sigh of resignation mixed with pride. Before departure, sailors performed small rituals. They offered a drop of mead to Aegir and Ran, the sea god, and his wife who collected the drowned. Some kissed the ship's bow, whispering names of those who'd returned before them. The gestures were simple, but sacred. You realized they weren't seeking protection, only permission. The sea didn't grant safety, it granted audience. The longhouse held these nights like breaths before storms. Families gathered to tell the same jokes again, to eat one more stew together, to linger longer by the fire. The laughter was a shield against silence, the only weapon against uncertainty. In that warmth, people memorized each other's faces, not from sentimentality, but from survival. Memory was insurance when the sea forgot to give back. You can hear the songs they sang before leaving, low, rhythmic, built to match the rowing stroke. The lyrics spoke of courage, but always with a trace of sorrow. Even the bravest men knew that every voyage was a gamble. The melody loops like waves, endless and hypnotic. You find yourself swaying slightly, your breath sinking to that ancient cadence of departure. The sea wasn't an absence, it was an extension of the home. When ships left the fjord, smoke from longhouses followed them, curling upward like a farewell. That smoke carried love, worry, promises. The Vikings believed that fire and sea understood each other. Both devoured, both cleansed, both demanded respect. You can almost see that glow reflected in the dark water, the hearth guiding the oars. In the distance, thunder rolls, storms were expected, almost welcomed. They reminded people that control was a myth. A calm sea was more terrifying. It meant the gods were thinking. Better a tempest you could fight than silence you couldn't interpret. You smile faintly because that philosophy still fits life itself. When sailors returned, their stories became treasure. They spoke of whales bigger than churches, of islands that smelled like honey, of skies that never went dark. Truth and exaggeration blurred until it didn't matter. The Longhouse needed myth as much as bread. You realize now, their greatest voyages weren't across water, but through imagination. Those who didn't return were spoken of with reverence. Their names weren't erased. They were folded into the songs. Their fates sung beside the fire until their spirits felt close again. To die at sea wasn't tragedy, it was transformation. The ocean didn't take, it absorbed. In their worldview, even loss had purpose, even absence had weight. As you stand listening to the tide, you feel a strange peace in its repetition. The waves sound the same now as they did 1,000 years ago. The same rhythm that rocked Viking ships now lulls you toward rest. You inhale salt air through imagined smoke and realize the truth they lived by. The sea isn't cruel or kind, it's honest. And when you return to the warmth of the Longhouse, brushing cold air from your skin, the sound of the waves still hums beneath your breath. It's the heartbeat of their world, relentless, ancient, and oddly soothing. You lie down, listening, half dreaming of sails, half hearing fire. For a moment, you understand why they kept going back, not for conquest, but for meaning. The storm doesn't arrive with thunder first. It begins with silence. The wind pauses, birds vanish, and even the Longhouse feels it. The air thickening, the dogs whining low. Then comes the first gust, sharp as a blade. The roof creaks, ropes strain, and the fire bends sideways. You can feel the shift in pressure against your skin, that eerie balance between fear and awe. Outside, the sea becomes a voice. It doesn't roar, it chants, long, low, endless. Rain begins to fall in sheets, drumming on turf and timber. Inside, everyone moves calmly, securing what can be saved. The Vikings didn't scream at storms, they worked with them. Someone tightens the door latch, another adds logs to strengthen the fire. It's not panic, it's participation in nature's ritual. Children huddle near the hearth, eyes wide. An elder tells them softly, "Thor's hammer swings tonight." The thunder answers, rolling like laughter through the mountains. Fear turns into story before it can take root. You realize how myth transformed terror into narrative, giving the storm a personality, a reason. Every clap of thunder meant gods were watching, not punishing. That belief made even chaos intimate. The roof drips in places, but no one complains. A man moves a bucket beneath the leak. The rhythm of water becomes another instrument in the night's song. Fire, rain, and wind compose a symphony older than language. You listen, mesmerized. Even destruction sounds poetic here, violent, yet predictable, harsh, but cyclical. Like winter, like grief, like everything real. The smell of wet wool and smoke fills the air. Someone stirs stew again, as if defying the storm by cooking through it. The spoon clinks against iron, grounding everyone in sound. You can almost taste the salt in the air from both sea and sweat. The body doesn't know where the ocean ends and the home begins. That confusion feels strangely peaceful. Lightning flashes through the smoke hole, white and blinding. For a second, faces glow ghost-like, startled but calm. You see the beauty in their stillness. No prayers, no panic, just acceptance. The Vikings didn't worship control, they worshipped endurance. They didn't ask storms to stop, they asked for courage to face them. You wonder if that might be the truest kind of faith. Then comes the wind's crescendo, the longhouse groaning like an old ship at sea. The beams shudder, firs tremble, the world outside vanishes into noise. Yet somehow no one moves. The people remain still, eyes on the fire, trusting it completely. The small, steady flame becomes their anchor. You can almost feel its warmth, holding the world together by sheer will. Minutes stretch into hours. The rain shifts from rage to rhythm, from pounding to patter. Children fall asleep, their breathing sinking with the storm's retreat. The air softens, the light dims. The storm, like all living things, grows tired. You exhale too, realizing how even nature's fury eventually folds into rest. When dawn arrives, it's pale and slow. Mist rises from the sea, curling through the cracks like ghostly fingers. The longhouse smells clean, renewed. The storm didn't destroy, it purified. People step outside barefoot, testing the mud, looking at the horizon. The sky feels enormous again. You can almost sense gratitude in their silence. Survival was never assumed. It was celebrated. Someone kneels to thank the earth, pressing a palm against wet soil. Another refills the fire pit with dry wood. There's no triumph, no song, only work resuming. You realize that this quiet return to normalcy is its own kind of prayer. The world breaks, then rebuilds, over and over. The Vikings didn't resist that cycle. They trusted it. By evening, laughter returns, faint but sure. The story of the storm will be told again tonight, softened, maybe even exaggerated. The fear will become entertainment. The thunder will gain dialogue. That's how they tamed chaos, by turning it into memory. You sit close to the fire again, listening and understand. Peace doesn't mean safety. It means knowing the storm always ends. And as the fire crackles, the last scent of salt fades into fur. You breathe deeply, the air heavy but calm. The sea still murmurs outside, quieter now, content. The longhouse stands unbroken, its heart glowing amber. You close your eyes and drift with it, not asleep yet, but surrendered. The storm has passed, but its rhythm still lingers in your chest like a slow, eternal drumbeat. There were no ticking clocks in the Viking world, no hour hands to measure worth or waste. Time moved in smells, sounds, and shadows. You can almost feel it. The shift in air when frost thickened, the way smoke clung heavier to the roof when winter deepened. They didn't count hours, they felt them. The sun was both clock and comfort, the fire their second hand. Inside the longhouse, people read time through routine. The creak of the roof at dawn, the first cough from an elder, the smell of porridge rising from the pot, all signaled morning. Evening came when light disappeared from the cracks in the walls, when the dogs curled into themselves, when talk turned from chores to stories. The day was a rhythm, not a race. You watch as an old man sharpens his knife without hurry. His movements are patient, circular. Around him, nothing seems urgent. That's because the Vikings lived with nature's tempo. You couldn't rush a harvest or command the sea. Impatience was foolishness here, the kind of arrogance that cost lives. So they learned to wait, to watch, to let the world set the pace. The seasons shaped their souls. Spring was work, summer was expansion, autumn was preparation, and winter was reflection. Each carried its own emotion, its own pace. Winter especially, long, merciless, yet strangely intimate. It forced people inward, both physically and spiritually. The Longhouse became not just shelter, but world entire. Time folded inward, like breath between snowfalls. The walls marked seasons like tree rings, soot for winters, pale streaks for summers. You can almost trace your finger along them, feeling years like skin. Every stain tells a story, a smoky spring of sickness, a bright summer of births, a dark winter of silence. The Vikings didn't record time, they absorbed it. Their architecture remembered for them. During endless nights, when the sun barely rose, people turned to craft. Wood carving, weaving, storytelling, all ways to tame the hours. Work was therapy, repetition was meditation. You understand that deeply. When the outside world slows, you must create your own momentum inside. That's how they survived not just physically, but mentally. Festivals punctuated the long winter, small celebrations of endurance, solstice feasts, mead toasts, song contests, laughter became rebellion against monotony. You can hear it now, echoing softly in the rafters, tired but joyful. Every smile was an act of defiance against the darkness. Even boredom was treated with reverence, proof that they were still here, still breathing. They didn't separate time into productivity and leisure. There was only living. The same hands that hunted also carved spoons. The same hours that worked also worshipped. Everything blended because division was a luxury. In this world, meaning came from continuity, not change. That's why their stories looped endlessly. Circles inside circles, mirroring the sky. When you look outside, the horizon doesn't move. Snow covers everything, turning even mountains into silence. It's beautiful and oppressive at once. Yet inside the Longhouse, the firelight flickers as if laughing at the cold. That flame is their clock now, measured not in seconds, but in survival. When the flame burns low, the day ends. When it rises again, time renews. Eventually, you stop wondering what day it is. The rhythm consumes you. Sleep, work, eat, story, sleep again. You realize time feels different when every moment is essential. There's no waste here because nothing is optional. Even rest is duty. The Vikings understood that better than anyone. Existence itself was labor, and labor was sacred. When spring finally arrives, it doesn't shout, it whispers. Ice melts, mud thickens, birds return hesitantly. You can smell the difference first. Wet earth, thawing moss, the faint sweetness of sap. Life doesn't restart, it remembers. The people step outside blinking, reborn by endurance. That's how they marked time. Not by calendars, but by survival stories. And as you sit back by the fire, feeling the ghost of cold still lingering in your bones, You realize how peaceful their time truly was. It didn't chase, didn't accuse, it simply flowed, like water, under ice. You exhale, matching its pace. Time, here, isn't something you spend, it's something that spends you gently, completely. Winter in the Viking world wasn't a season, it was a personality. You feel it before you see it. The air sharpening, the ground hardening, the world drawing its breath. Outside, the fjord freezes at the edges, trapping reflections of mountains in its glassy skin. Inside, fires burn longer, meals stretch thinner, and conversations grow slower. The world narrows but deepens, the smell of smoke becomes constant, clinging to skin, hair, and cloth. Even dreams smell like it. People move slower, conserving heat and words. The Longhouse becomes its own planet, a small sun glowing inside a black universe of frost. You can almost feel the quiet pressing against the walls, soft but heavy, like snow waiting for collapse. Days blend together. Dawn is only a slightly paler version of night. Time dissolves into sameness, yet instead of despair, there's rhythm. Each day repeats with small variations, a new story told, a new tool mended, a new memory shared. The Vikings didn't fight monotony, they befriended it. Repetition was their lullaby, and winter their teacher in patience. Children draw shapes in frost on the walls, their laughter muffled but bright. Women spin wool, the thread twirling endlessly, hypnotic. Men carve runes, faces, animals, nothing urgent, just movement to keep the hands honest. Even silence has sound here, the pop of a log, the sigh of someone dreaming, the hum of survival itself. It's not boredom, it's being. The food changes too, less fresh, more preserved. Dried fish, smoked meat, fermented vegetables. Each bite tastes faintly of smoke and salt, like memory turned edible. The smell fills the air, comforting in its predictability. You realize the Vikings didn't eat for pleasure in winter, they ate for remembrance. Each meal said, "We prepared well." That was pride enough. Outside, storms blur the horizon. The sky becomes white and endless. Occasionally, someone steps out to fetch snow for water or to check the animals. They move like ghosts, wrapped in furs, faces red from cold. When they return, their breath steams in the warm air, mingling with laughter. It's always laughter, quiet, necessary, like striking flint against the dark. Night brings deeper stillness. The world outside freezes mid-motion. Even wind hesitates. Inside, stories return, looping again. Gods, ghosts, heroes. No one asks for new tales. They want the old ones, the reliable ones. You begin to understand why. Repetition builds security. The familiar rhythm of words replaces the sun. Each story another log on the fire of endurance. Sometimes the aurora appears, green and silver ribbons dancing through the sky. The door opens briefly, and people gasp quietly, as if afraid to disturb it. The Vikings believed those lights were spirits, maybe fallen warriors, crossing between worlds. You watch too, breath held, the cold biting your face. Even beauty feels sharp here, magnificent but edged. As months pass, furs thin, tempers fray, but still they endure. They make small jokes about the cold, about the stubbornness of snow. Even complaining becomes ritual, a way to remind themselves they still have voices. You can almost hear it, weary laughter, soft swearing, a rhythm of resilience disguised as humor. When the first melt begins, it's almost imperceptible, a single drop falling from the roof, a patch of dark soil showing through. But inside, hope flares immediately. Someone stirs the fire brighter, someone sings louder. The return of sound, of birds, of color feels like divine reward. You realize they didn't survive winter through strength, but through faith in repetition. By the final days of frost, everyone is both exhausted and grateful. The season that demanded everything also gave them purpose. When spring finally breaks, it's not celebration. It's relief, quiet and genuine. You feel that same release now, breathing deeper. The longhouse sighs too, its beams loosening under the weight of melted snow. And as the door opens to the first true morning light, the air smells new again, wet soil, wood smoke, thawing hope. The Vikings step out blinking, shoulders straight, hearts steady. They've survived another cycle, another silence. You stand there too, in that imagined light, and realize that winter never truly leaves. It just teaches you how to wait beautifully. The longhouse has grown quiet. The day's smoke lingers low, curling like slow thoughts. You can almost feel the warmth thinning, not gone, just softer, like the final note of a song that doesn't want to end. Shadows move gently across fur and wood. Someone yawns. Someone stirs the ashes. The fire is small now, but alive, glowing like the heart of a sleeping creature. The air feels heavier at this hour. Each sound becomes rounder, slower. The crackle of embers stretches like a sigh. You watch sparks rise through the vent, disappearing into the dark. The Vikings believed fire had a soul, that every flame carried a fragment of the sun. Maybe that's why they never truly let it die. Each night was a conversation between the sky and the hearth. People settle in, adjusting their cloaks and blankets. The longhouse breathes as one. Inhale, exhale, the rhythm of shared fatigue. Someone hums a tune without melody, the kind meant more for the fire than for people. The smell of smoke mixes with fur and skin, earthy and tender. It's not cleanliness that comforts, it's familiarity. The house smells like existence. You notice how every movement grows deliberate, as if the air itself has thickened. Hands move slower, voices lower. Time bends here, stretching into something gentle. You begin to understand why these nights lasted forever, not because of the cold, but because no one wanted to wake the silence. The world outside could wait. Inside, there was peace. The elders whisper old prayers, barely audible, not begging, just acknowledging. They thank the fire for staying, the walls for holding, the air for not freezing. Each word lands like a soft drumbeat, part gratitude, part routine. You realize how simple worship once was, noticing what's still here. Gratitude whispered through cracked lips and steady breath. A log shifts in the fire, scattering sparks like small stars. Children giggle in their sleep. The noise feels enormous in the stillness, but no one shushes them. Even in dreams, joy is sacred. You can almost hear the faint hum of a lullaby returning, the same one sung generations ago, circular, repetitive, eternal. A melody built to outlast memory. Outside, snow begins again, a soft percussion on the roof, rhythmic, infinite. The sound is perfect. You feel it more than hear it, a hush that fills every pause. The Vikings loved snow for its silence. It erased mistakes. Swallowed noise gave rest to the restless. You sense that too. The way stillness can feel like forgiveness. Somewhere in the dark, a dog sighs. The air is thick with sleep. You glance toward the rafters and see smoke curling like thought, like the spirit of the house dreaming. You imagine what it dreams of: summer grass, open water, the faces of those who built it. The structure itself feels alive, a keeper of every breath and story. Your own eyelids grow heavy as you listen. The fire crackles in long intervals, each pop a heartbeat. The rhythm pulls you inward, downward. The longhouse fades, but its warmth remains, a golden haze behind your eyes. For a moment, you are one of them, wrapped in fur, breathing smoke, dreaming of endless light. And then the last log collapses. Embers scatter, glowing faintly like constellations across ash. The house exhales. Sleep settles over everything, not abrupt, but total, the kind of sleep that feels older than language. You realize that even fire must rest eventually. The glow softens, and the world hums itself quiet. Somewhere far away, a rooster will call. Somewhere, dawn will stretch. But not yet. For now, time holds still, gentle as fur, soft as breath. The fire's last light trembles and then steadies, promising tomorrow without needing to say it. You close your eyes too, floating in that ancient rhythm, wrapped in smoke and calm. And as you drift, you understand the longhouse never truly sleeps. It waits, quiet, warm, and infinite. It breathes through centuries, keeping watch over anyone willing to listen. The fire's last breath becomes yours. The house dreams, and you dream with it. Morning doesn't arrive suddenly here. It seeps. The air brightens by degrees, grey before gold. Frost melts in slow surrender, dripping through cracks, hissing faintly where it meets embers. You hear it before you see it, that delicate whisper of thaw. The longhouse smells like warmth and water now, like something reborn. You can almost taste the clean edge of a new day. The first to rise is always the same, the firekeeper, quiet, careful, practiced. They kneel, stir the ashes, coaxing new light from last night's bones. A faint flame flickers back, trembling at first, then steady. You realize this is resurrection in its purest form. No sermon, no miracle, just patience and breath. The Vikings didn't need divine revelation. They built their own each dawn. Others wake slowly, stretching beneath furs. There's no rush, no alarm. The rhythm remains sacred, movement first, words later. Someone coughs, someone laughs softly, someone mutters a sleepy curse at the cold. Life returns not in noise but in texture, the sound of wool shifting, feet on straw, spoons against wood. You can feel the day taking shape, calm and kind. Breakfast smells faintly of smoke and grain. The first bites are quiet, eaten without ceremony. They eat together, not to mark time, but to rejoin it. Food tastes better after silence. It always does. You notice how they chew slowly, eyes half closed, as if still somewhere between dream and waking. The house hums again, alive but unhurried. Outside, light thickens. The snow reflects it inward, turning the walls silver. A child opens the door east, and cold air rushes in, sharp, clean, alive. No one complains. It feels like proof that the world still exists. You feel that same small thrill. That moment when reality returns, gentle but undeniable. It's the same every morning, and yet always new. Someone begins to sing, not loudly, just a few words repeated in rhythm with chores. The song isn't about anything, it's about being, about starting again. The Vikings didn't pray for perfect days, they prayed for continuity. The music carries that truth, flowing through the smoke and light like something half human, half wind. The fire burns brighter now, its glow reflected in eyes, still heavy with sleep. You can see gratitude without words. Gratitude for the fire, for each other, for another morning that didn't have to come, but did. That quiet awe threads through everything. In how they speak, move, and look at the world. You sense it, too, in your own chest, like a slow, steady drumbeat. Outside, frost melts into soil, and the earth exhales. Birds return in small bursts of sound. The air smells faintly of pine and thawed moss. You imagine stepping out barefoot, the cold biting your skin but not cruelly. Every breath feels earned. The longhouse behind you hums softly, smoke curling upward like a greeting to the sun. Children run first, their laughter slicing the morning stillness. Adults follow with deliberate grace, unbothered by the mud, by the mess of life returning. The world is imperfect, but it's alive, and that's enough. You realize that's been the meaning all along. Endurance, not conquest. Warmth, not glory. By mid-morning, the longhouse glows from within, smoke trailing upward, laughter drifting outward. The sea reflects the sky again, calm and endless. The wind carries the smell of salt and ash, of living history. You take a slow breath, feeling the same peace they must have felt after surviving the dark. And as you stand there, watching their world and listening to your heartbeat sync with theirs, you understand the true gift of these nights. They never really end. The fire that burned in their homes burns in memory, in breath, in you. The house lives on wherever there's warmth, patience, and the will to keep the light steady. You close your eyes, hearing only fire, wind, and calm laughter. The longhouse fades to amber glow. Morning settles around you like fur. And in that warmth, history feels alive, slow, quiet, infinite. You sit close to the embers now, the air trembling with faint heat. The fire isn't fierce anymore. It doesn't need to be. Its strength lies in persistence, not display. You watch how it burns slower, smaller, but still steady, a quiet lesson in survival. The Vikings understood that too. Warmth wasn't victory over the cold, it was partnership with it. Balance, not dominance. Every civilization has chased light, but few have listened to it. The Norse did. To them, fire wasn't just energy, it was consciousness, a fragment of creation's first spark. They believed its glow held memory, that each flame remembered every flame before it. When you look into the embers, you feel that truth pulse softly. All fires are one fire, all warmth the same prayer repeated endlessly. The smell of smoke wraps around you, dense, patient, eternal. It's the scent of continuity. You realize warmth has never really been about temperature. It's about belonging. Every creature seeks it. Every story begins beside it. From cave to castle, from ship to city, we've always returned to the glow. The fire doesn't change. We do. Yet it forgives us each time. You can almost hear it speak in crackles, small sentences in a language older than words. Each spark tells you something, that comfort requires attention, that peace demands tending, that even safety is an act of participation. The Vikings didn't keep fire for convenience. They nurtured it like a soul. Maybe that's why their nights felt alive long after their voices faded. The longhouse flickers with memory. You see faces illuminated in orange, laughing, crying, silent, timeless. None of them think about the future. They're too busy keeping the present alive. There's a holiness in that simplicity. You begin to understand why they didn't fear darkness. When you have warmth, darkness isn't threat, it's contrast. It makes the glow mean something. Fire teaches humility. Too much air, it rages. Too little, it dies. It asks for balance. The same balance life requires. You feed it gently, learning the rhythm of patience. You can almost feel the heat shift under your palm, not burning, just reminding you that control is illusion. The flame belongs to no one. It only borrows space to teach. The Vikings had a word for the feeling of being safe and complete within warmth. Heimer, meaning both home and world. To them, the hearth wasn't a place inside the world, it was the world. Everything beyond it was journey. Everything within it was truth. You realize that same idea still lingers in us. The longing for a center that feels eternal. You think of all the fires that came after, and castles, cottages, city lamps, electric light. Each one an echo of this same orange heart. We've changed materials, but not meaning. The flame still says, stay a while. Remember, you're alive. Even the smallest candle continues that message. The universe keeps whispering. Endurance is light in motion. Smoke rises slowly, carrying invisible stories. It touches the roof, then slips into the night, into the stars. Somewhere above, the same starlight falls over modern cities, modern rooms, modern fires. The connection is invisible, but absolute. You realize time isn't linear when warmth binds it. Every age burns in the same glow. You close your eyes and listen. The fire no longer pops. It hums, deep and low, like the earth breathing through the floor. That sound has no beginning, no end, just presence. And in that presence, you understand what they must have known all along. Survival isn't the absence of struggle. It's the choice to keep tending the flame anyway. When you open your eyes, the world feels softer. The room, the smoke, even the dark hum quietly together. You are both observer and participant, keeper and kept. The warmth has become thought, and thought has become peace. Somewhere beyond centuries and ash, the fire smiles, small, steady, eternal. There's a point when sound fades, not because it's gone, but because it's complete. That's where you are now, inside stillness, so deep it feels like sound turned inward. The longhouse doesn't creak anymore, the air doesn't move, even the fire has stopped speaking, its glow reduced to soft, gold veins beneath grey ash, and yet everything feels alive. Stillness, you realize, isn't emptiness. It's fullness without motion. The Vikings must have known that, how peace could hum louder than battle. In their world, quiet was earned. It came after storms, after toil, after laughter had softened into sighs. This moment, this silence, is the reward for surviving sound. You breathe it in like warmth turned invisible. Your senses sharpen in the hush. You notice faint details, the smell of pine smoke lingering in cloth, the soft rasp of your own breath, the faint vibration of wind above the roof. Time slows, dissolving between heartbeats. You're no longer waiting for anything. You are part of the waiting itself. That's what peace really is. Participation in stillness. Outside, frost glitters under the first thin moonlight. You imagine how many times this same moon watched over them, unchanging, patient. The Vikings looked at that same glow after victories and losses alike. To them, the moon wasn't mystery, it was companionship. It didn't speak, but it stayed. Presence itself was enough. Inside, someone stirs in sleep, murmuring something soft. The sound doesn't disturb the peace, it deepens it. Even dreams here seem gentle, content to share the silence instead of filling it. You realize that's what true calm does. It doesn't demand stillness from everything else. It simply allows space for it to exist. You start to feel the line blur between your thoughts and the fire's fading heat. The warmth becomes internal, memory more than sensation. It's as if peace has shifted from environment to bloodstream. You understand now why the Vikings called death a journey home. This feeling, this deep calm, must have been what they meant. Not ending, but merging with stillness. The Longhouse has witnessed countless moments like this. Quiet nights where nothing happens, and yet everything continues. That's why it lasted generations. It wasn't built only from wood, but from rhythm, repetition, patience. Every silence stacked upon another until the walls themselves learned to hum softly with memory. You think of how far you are from them now, different age, different world, and yet the stillness feels identical. The same warmth, the same hush, the same pulse behind the quiet. That's what makes history eternal. Not the wars or names, but the moments that repeat across time like heartbeats in sleep. Outside, the stars fade slightly. The night isn't over, but it's beginning to think about morning. You sense that subtle transition, that turning of the world that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Change moves quietly, like light under a door. You smile faintly. Even peace evolves. When you exhale, the air feels clean, light, new. You don't know how long you've been listening. Minutes, hours, centuries. It doesn't matter. You are part of the same continuum now. Warmth, silence, breath. The Longhouse disappears, but the feeling remains. The hum of human stillness that no wind can erase. And as the fire's glow fades to ember grey, the night itself seems to lean closer, wrapping around you like fur. Nothing asks. Nothing needs. Everything simply is. You let go of thought, of history, of self, and rest inside that eternal quiet. This is what the Longhouse was built for. Not just to protect from cold, but to teach the art of peace. The air moves like velvet over your skin, warm near the hearth, cool along the walls where the turf roof meets timber. Smoke drifts upward in soft ribbons, curing the rafters to a deep, tar-dark sheen. Vikings let that smoke saturate wood because it hardened fibers and chased insects away. It mattered in winters that gnawed houses from the inside. Think of it as ancient home maintenance with aromatherapy. Your diffuser is a fire, your scent is survival. You exhale and settle deeper. Your cheek grazes fur, coarse, then soft, as if two seasons live in one pelt. Beneath it, the mattress is straw and moss, a springy earth memory stitched into sleep. People added herbs to the fill, thyme, angelica, juniper, not for luxury, but to mask damp and shoe pests. Smell was a shield here. Modern sprays promise fresh linen. Theirs promised fewer bites. The logic is the same. You let that herbal hush fold your thoughts closed. Light is gentle, more ember than flame, so objects become silhouettes. The curve of a bowl, the gleam on an iron brooch, a dog's slow rise and fall. Oil lamps gutter with fish fat fuel, faint halos that never try to be daylight. Weak light mattered. It trained eyes to rest and voices to soften. You realize brightness is a negotiable habit. Tonight, your pupils make peace with dusk, and your mind follows softly behind. Timber ribs arch overhead like the belly of an upturned boat, a design memory of journeys that fed the landbound. The Longhouse borrowed ship logic, long, low, forgiving to wind, stubborn against collapse. It mattered because roofs shouldn't argue with storms. You smile at the quiet humility, architecture that bows to weather and wins by politeness. The rafters hum with that lesson until even your breath keeps time with their patience. Heat lives in gradients, generous near the hearth, shy at the thresholds. People learn to sit by age and need, elders closest, children in soft rings farther out. That arrangement mattered more than manners. It rationed warmth like water. In modern terms, it's smart heating without the device. You feel yourself placed, not by rank, but by temperature. And the fairness of it untangles a knot behind your ribs. The floor gives a faint straw crackle when someone shifts, a sound as soft as a page turned by a librarian who prefers you sleeping. Floors mattered because bodies needed dryness more than softness. A dry bed saves more lives than a soft one. It's the kind of math no one advertises, but every ancestor trusted. You tuck your toes under fur and agree with results over rhetoric. You taste salt in the air, sea carried in on cloaks, crystallized on hair, vanished in steam. Salt mattered as food and medicine, but also as proof. It said a boat returned, a net was filled, a storm endured. In the quiet, you understand why taste can be a monument. Your tongue reads the room like a chronicle, and the chronicle says, enough for tonight. Your shoulders lower without orders. A low hum begins near the hearth, not quite a melody, more a corridor of sound. Work songs learned daylight rhythms, night songs learned circular ones, so no one needed to remember where beginnings were. Circles mattered in a world of seasons and cycles. Lines belonged to maps and myths. You let the circle gather you loop by loop and until your thoughts move without corners. Iron rests on a peg, a knife, a buckle, a fibula pin, all dark as cooled stars. Metal mattered because winter respects sharpness even when it bullies everything else. It also promised repair tomorrow. Leather could be punched, wood shaved, rope spliced. You think of tomorrow as a friendly tool rack, not a schedule. The idea is almost comic in its sanity, and the small smile it makes is sleep's favorite key. Somewhere, a kettle ticks as it cools, metal contracting with tiny conversations you cannot answer. These small sounds mattered because they reported on safety. Things that explode shout, things that endure click. Your body trusts the clicking. You picture a ledger in your chest where each tick deposits calm, interest compounding in the currency of eyelids. The door plank moans once, a long wail note, then settles. Doors mattered as lungs for houses, trading breath with weather in careful sips. Nobody wanted draughts, but nobody wanted staleness either. The balance was an art, not a setting. You feel the room take one slow inhale of night and release it as warmth, and somewhere in that exchange, your own breath learns cooperation. By the time fire contracts to architecture, all glow, little flame, the longhouse has turned from shelter into sentence, from sentence into lullaby. The words are timber, smoke, fur, patience. They mattered then. They matter now. You lie still and let the house say them again, slower each time until meanings loosen and only sound remains, and only warmth, and then only you, dissolving gently into both. You hear the ember rake hush through ash, a brushing gasp that feels like night being combed. The tool's handle is smooth from thousands of hands, each pass a vote for morning. Tending coals mattered more than heroics. Fires die faster than legends. Your modern productivity app is a stick with a purpose, and the irony pleases you. The ember bed evens, and your pulse copies its calm geometry, line by patient line. A spindle whirl turns, soft whir, the sound a hammock makes for thoughts. Bone or stone, it taught wrists to measure hours without clocks. Thread mattered because thread becomes clothes, rope, sails, everything that holds other things together. You consider how much of your life is thread with different names. The humor lands kindly. You are mostly knots pretending to be plans. The spindle forgives you and keeps singing. Someone braids cordage by firelight, 3 strands crossing like slow conversation. Braids mattered because single fibers snap, agreements don't. The lesson is obvious enough to feel ancient and fresh at once. You try it on your breathing, in, out. And the pattern pleases your ribs, as if lungs prefer community too. The cord grows without ceremony, and your worries shrink for lack of solitary strength. A ladle circles the pot in predictable orbits, barley and broth turning galaxies under a wooden moon. Stirring mattered for more than cooking. It kept bottoms from burning, food and morale alike. You think about how many problems are bottom problems disguised as flavor issues. The dry joke makes your chest loosen. The ladle keeps circling, and the night approves the modest astronomy. Shoes dry near the flames, steam lifting from leather like the last thoughts of a puddle. Foot wraps hang beside them, thin flags of endurance. Dry feet mattered more than poetry. Trench feet could rewrite families. The practical truth is oddly tender. Love sometimes looks like moving boots 3 inches closer to heat. You pull the fur over your ankles as if performing ritual, and ritual accepts the offering. A comb of wood passes through hair with patient clicks, untangling the day. Grooming mattered less for vanity than for lice. Comfort and health were the same chore with different names. You enjoy the small, dry humor that history repeats as hygiene tips. The clicks continue, rhythmic, satisfying. Proof that knots can yield to gentleness and time. Your thoughts take the hint and tangle less. A whetstone kisses steel. Hush, hush, giving edges back their opinion. Sharpening mattered because tomorrow always asks questions. Dull tools reply poorly. The sound is confident without volume, and you borrow that attitude for your heartbeat, not loud, just sure. You feel the strange luxury of being next to competence. It's warmer than the fire and needs less fuel. Logs are turned, not added, a miser's grace that stretches heat without spending more. Turning mattered because fuel was forest translated into hours, and hours were life. Efficiency here is not obsession, it's affection for wood. You imitate the move in your mind, rotating thought so the unburned sides can warm. It works embarrassingly well, and you pretend you knew it already. Hands sew quietly, sinews sliding through leather with a damp, decisive sound. Mending mattered because new things were rarer than patience. The stitch count is slow, and the slowness is soothing. Proof that repair is a kind of prayer with better ergonomics. You feel parts of you align with that logic. Holes, meeting thread, in places no one sees and everyone feels. Children stack small chips of wood into meaningless towers that still mean everything. Play mattered. It taught balance, grip, consequence, laughter. The towers fall and no one winced. The lesson lands softly on straw. Your breath joins the game, stacking, toppling, stacking again, discovering that failure has the most pleasant sound when the floor forgives. A cup passes hand to hand, not mead this time, just warm water with a sliver of herb. Sharing mattered because bodies are stoves and stoves share heat. The rim taps wood once, a tiny toast to survival without ceremony. You taste nothing remarkable and find that comforting. Not every sip needs to be a story. Most of life is hydration with good timing. When repetition completes its round, the house grows so quiet the quiet has texture. You feel fabric against your wrist, straw under your palm, breath where your collar opens. Litany mattered because sameness is merciful. It tells nerves there's nothing new to fear. You roll toward the warmer side of fur, and the longhouse rolls with you, an old friend who knows how not to wake you while keeping you warm. The first flakes return without announcement. Soft, slow, the color of forgiveness. They drift through the smoke hole and vanish before touching the coals, melting mid-air like sighs. The longhouse feels quieter when it snows, as if the outside world has agreed to whisper. Snow wasn't enemy or decoration, it was mentor. It taught patience, concealment, humility. It reminded the North that silence can be work too. You watch it gather along the roofline, layering itself with polite persistence. Every flake settles exactly where it belongs. No competition, no haste. The weight will bow beams by morning, but for now, it's grace in motion. The Vikings didn't shovel resentment at it. They adapted. Roofs were steep, walls thick, minds thicker. Winter never punished, it refined. You inhale the lesson and feel it cool but kind in your lungs. Inside, light becomes silver instead of orange. Smoke threads upward like the ghost of warmth seeking promotion. The hush grows heavy, pressing gently on the skull until thoughts slow to match. You remember that snow muffles sound not by hostility, but by generosity. It absorbs chaos and leaves conversation behind. You envy that ability and borrow it, letting noise dissolve between breaths. Someone brushes snow from a cloak near the door, each movement a snowfall of its own. The flakes hiss on contact with heat, small deaths that smell briefly clean. Steam rises, the scent of wool, salt, and outside. You realize snow is just another form of water learning patience. It proves that transformation doesn't have to rush or boast. It can happen quietly, beautifully, without witness. The dogs shift, noses twitching at the cold perfume sneaking in. Animals trusted snow. It carried no deceit. Its predictability was safety. Humans tried to read omens in the sky, but dogs already knew. The world was pausing, not ending. You sense that same pause within yourself. Heartbeat unhurried, mind finally domesticated. Snow trains even thought to sit still. Through the vent, moonlight glints off white roofs like a frozen sea. The horizon disappears, making the world smaller and safer. Distance no longer taunts, it folds inward. You see how this shrinking makes room for rest. The Vikings used long nights for reflection, not complaint. Snow forced honesty. There is nowhere to go but inward. You follow that command gladly. The scent of pine resin thickens as logs burn slower, stickier. The fire's color changes, amber fading to rose. Shadows soften into watercolor. You think about how snow outside and smoke inside form the same pattern in reverse. One cool, one warm, both teaching surrender. Even opposites here negotiate peace. Someone hums a half-remembered melody. Not hymn, not lullaby, something between. The notes rise, strike the roof, fall back down like flakes too heavy to stay sky. The Vikings sang not to celebrate, but to equalize. Song filled what silence left unfinished. You let the sound fill you without asking for meaning. It's enough that it exists. Snow keeps falling. Hours mean nothing now. The rhythm is vertical, not linear. Each flake a small act of persistence. Each drift another page in the same white book. You realize snow writes history faster than humans ever could, then erases it for mercy. The thought feels pure, light, and final. You stop needing to think at all. Eventually, someone closes the door, shutting out the glittering night. The last draft sighs through the room, cool and loyal. It smells of open air, the reminder that outside still matters, but not tonight. You tuck yourself deeper into fur. The world can freeze. Your pulse won't. The snow will keep falling whether you watch or sleep. That's its gift, continuation without approval. You surrender to that constancy, eyes half closed, heartbeat sinking with a rhythm older than language. The last thing you hear before drifting is a single flake tapping wood, history choosing gentleness. The storm has left days ago, but the sea never stops talking. You hear it now, faint through turf and distance. A low, endless murmur, like a god remembering words. The Vikings slept with that sound stitched into their nights. It was lullaby and threat, reminder and promise. For them, the ocean wasn't outside life, it was the pulse beneath it. You listen, and your own pulse joins obediently. Waves move slower in the dark. You can't see them, but you know their weight by tone. There's comfort in that unseen certainty. Something vast moving rhythmically, uninterested in your worries. The sea doesn't care whether ships sail or sink. It repeats itself perfectly, and repetition is its form of kindness. You take that kindness like medicine, one steady breath after another. Inside, people sleep. Their dreams float with the rhythm of surf. Even the fire's crackle seems to imitate it. Louder sets, softer retreat. The room becomes shoreline in miniature. The longhouse, a stranded ship dreaming of tide. The boundary between land and water feels imaginary now. You can almost smell salt over smoke, brine mixing with pine in a harmony no candle could reproduce. The Vikings often believed the sea heard prayers if whispered at night, not shouted, whispered. Volume insulted it. So when someone leaned near the door to murmur a wish for calm weather or safe passage, it wasn't superstition, it was etiquette. You imagine doing the same, speaking so softly your words melt before reaching the waves, trusting intention to travel faster than sound. The sound grows rhythmic again, each crash elongated by distance. It's not violence, it's breathing. The ocean inhales continents and exhales mist. If you ever need proof of balance, there it is. Infinite motion that never leaves its boundaries. You lie still, imitating that steadiness, the body learning geography from sound. Somewhere in that rhythm, memory stirs, all fires, all hands, all nights before. The Vikings were storytellers because the sea forced them to be. It erased what they built, so they built in speech instead. Water deletes monuments but memorizes rhythm. That's why even now, centuries later, you can feel its repetition teaching you patience. You begin to hear it differently. Less crash, more hush, as though the waves decided to respect your drowsiness. They reduce their amplitude out of courtesy. The world's largest engine whispering, sleep. You smile without meaning to. Surrender always starts as humor. The sea approves. Salt drifts in through the cracks, mixing with the house's warm musk. It smells like both endings and beginnings. You think of ships leaving, ships returning, lives folded into tide. The ocean doesn't archive, it circulates. Every story is rewritten in salt. You breathe that in, each inhale a footnote in an eternal epic. The rhythm continues, unbothered by your attention. It existed before you listened, and will after. That indifference feels generous. Freedom disguised as repetition. You let go of identity, timeline, noise. Only tide remains. When you finally drift towards sleep, the last sound isn't the sea, but its echo inside your chest. A low, calm roar beneath your ribs. You realize you've become the thing listening, ocean contained in skin. The Vikings might have called that belonging. You call it peace. And outside, waves keep folding against themselves, reciting the same vow they gave to every shore. I leave, I return. I leave, I return. The sea never needed applause, just acknowledgement. You offer that silently, eyes closed, pulse matching its measure, until even dreams smell faintly of salt and forever. Morning doesn't burst through the longhouse, it seeps, cautious, like a secret shared between smoke and frost. Light finds the cracks first, hairline glimmers across beams blackened by years of breath and fire. It paints nothing golden yet, just grey turning toward mercy. You realize dawn here isn't spectacle, it's negotiation. The world asks permission to wake, and the house says yes slowly. The fire, mostly ash, gives one last sigh before it's stirred. The embers underneath still glow, stubborn as hope. Someone kneels to coax them open, whispering more than speaking, and the flame obeys. It's strange how quietly resurrection happens. No thunder, no angels, just friction, patience, breath. You understand suddenly why the Vikings believed life began in sparks between ice and flame. Creation was always this small and this sure. The smell of warmth returns before its heat. Resin, wood, fur, the scent of continuation. People move like thoughts half remembered, careful, unhurried. Each gesture a conversation with time, hands on pots, feet on straw, lids lifted, lids set down. You listen to the choreography of survival, as elegant as any ritual ever written. Survival, it turns out, is the highest art form humans have ever practiced. Outside, snow softens into mist. The sea shifts color from steel to pearl. You hear gulls, not many, but enough to mark change. They circle unseen, calling into the new light. Their cries echo through the valley, ancient and matter-of-fact, like laughter that forgot its joke. You imagine the same sound centuries ago, the same sky, different faces looking up. Memory travels easiest through sound. One by one, the longhouse wakes fully. Tools hang, walls breathe, animals rustle. The noise doesn't shatter the peace, it completes it. You notice how the living and the built share the same pulse. The Vikings didn't separate soul from structure. A home wasn't owned, it was joined. The fire's smoke curling through dawn feels like proof of that marriage. Body and dwelling, both exhaling warmth into the cold. A child laughs at nothing. Someone answers with a yawn that turns into a grin. Small sounds, insignificant in history. Yet they are history. The proof that life never truly stops repeating itself. You realize that even memory doesn't aim backward. It loops. Every morning anywhere is this same morning once it slows enough to be noticed. The light grows more confident now, spilling across wool, catching bronze clasps in tiny suns. You think of how light behaves like understanding, gradual, polite, forgiving. It doesn't demand awareness, it offers it. You breathe deeper, feeling a quiet gratitude for visibility itself. The ability to see is luxury enough. Breakfast is simple: smoke, grain, laughter. It tastes like continuity. 1,000 mornings have shared the same ingredients: barley, salt, relief. You taste all of them at once, across time, as if the longhouse exists everywhere. Someone chooses endurance over despair. The meal ends without words. Satisfaction doesn't need witnesses. When the door opens, light floods in like memory coming home. The air is cold, but it feels honest. You step toward it, not out, not in, just between. The threshold is where all stories end and begin, the only sacred geometry humanity never questions. You stand there, still half asleep, and understand why they called this world Midgard. The middle yard, the breathing place between fire and frost, life and legend. You close your eyes, and the warmth of the room behind you meets the chill of morning on your face. Between them, you find equilibrium, neither past nor present, neither myth nor moment, just being. Dawn is not a new day. It's an old one forgiving itself again. You take that forgiveness like sunlight and let it dissolve everything heavy. And somewhere, inside and outside, above and beneath, the fire and the sea exchange greetings again. Smoke drifts upward, mist drifts inward, and the cycle restarts without announcement. The longhouse exhales, patient and infinite. You breathe with it. By evening, the longhouse will glow again, but for now it rests in its own echo. You can still smell the night before, pine, ash, salt, breath, woven into the grain of wood like memory etched deeper than time. That scent will remain even when walls rot and roofs collapse. Wood remembers warmth longer than flesh does. You touch the beam beside you and feel the faint hum of centuries still burning inside it. Outside, the world has changed names, maps, faiths, but the need for heat has never left. Fires became lamps, lamps became wires, wires became screens. Yet all of them chase the same orange promise: safety, connection, presence. The Vikings built with logs and faith. We build with circuits and longing. The material shifts, but the prayer stays. You imagine distant futures, other houses, other hearts, sitting beside their chosen glows. Maybe they call it electricity, maybe something nameless, but the gesture is identical, gathering around light. There's comfort in that inevitability. The universe keeps retelling its favorite story, people finding warmth and deciding it's enough. The sea still moves beyond your hearing. The snow still falls somewhere else. The fire still breathes in every room that dares to quiet down long enough to listen. Existence is nothing more than this layered continuity. You see it clearly now. The longhouse isn't gone. It just changed costumes. The same smoke rises from different mouths. The same laughter finds new languages. You lean back, closing your eyes. The silence isn't empty. It's crowded with echoes. Footsteps from 1,000 winters shuffle across your imagination. They don't ask to be remembered, only to be repeated. The lesson is simple and endless. Keep tending the fire, not perfectly, not forever, just again. The fur beneath your hand feels warm, though no flame burns nearby. That warmth is yours now, inherited, invisible. It hums beneath your pulse, proof that history is a body, not a book. You realize you've been part of it all along. The line between them and you, past and present, never existed. It was only smoke behaving like distance. A breeze slips through the vent, cool and kind, carrying the faintest scent of salt. Somewhere, the sea sighs again, recognizing you. Its sound has changed, but not its message. It whispers the same vow it gave to every generation that listened. Keep the warmth, pass it forward. You whisper back, I will. The fire inside you answers, not bright, not loud, but eternal. It burns with every story you've ever kept alive, every breath you've ever given to someone else's comfort. That's the quiet truth the Vikings built for. Warmth outlives everything. Outside, the wind slows. Inside, nothing needs tending. The world, for one blessed moment, holds its breath. You listen to the absence, to the fullness, to the longhouse still standing somewhere in memory, its beams humming through time. And in that hush, you finally understand what it means to rest. You exhale. The sound joins the centuries. The story ends, but the warmth remains. And so, the longhouse grows quiet again. Smoke rises one last time, curling through the hole in the roof, carrying the day's breath into the cold sky. Outside, frost forms delicate veins along the beams, the world's handwriting in crystal. Inside, the air glows soft with memory. Every heartbeat, every laugh, every sigh still lingers here, folded into the grain of the wood, into the fur, into the slow rhythm of survival. You can almost feel the ghosts of warmth, not haunting, just staying. They hum beneath the silence like a lullaby that never needed words. The fire is gone, but its echo remains in your chest, faint and steady, the oldest rhythm known to humankind. Maybe that's all history ever was, the memory of heat, shared and not forgotten. The Vikings believed that when a home burned, its spirit turned into wind. That wind would circle back, whispering through the cracks of every house built afterward, reminding people how to stay warm, how to belong. You can hear that same whisper now, soft, forgiving, eternal. It says, "You're home again, no matter where you are, no matter how far you've drifted. You breathe slowly once more, in through smoke, out through calm." The sea murmurs beyond hearing. The snow waits for its cue. The fire hums behind your eyes. All of it, centuries, storms, silence, blends into one long exhale of peace. The story doesn't end. It simply rests. The warmth that began in their hearth still glows inside yours. So tonight, as you drift, let the fire go on without tending. Let the house keep watch. Let the sea, the snow, the wind remember for you. You've walked far enough for one lifetime. Now, it's time to rest. Here, where history still breathes and everything is safe. Sleep well, traveler. May your dreams burn slow and your warmth never end.